Hello and welcome back. In this section we are going to learn about arrays in Java. So let's go back into Eclipse. An array is a series of value, is a variable that holds a series of value, and all the values must be of the same type. For example, let's say that I wanted to declare an integer array. So the way we do that, we declare int followed by opening and closing brackets, followed by the name of the array. I'm going to call this one numbers, and I'm going to set it to 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so that is my array. The values inside an array are called elements, and arrays are start at index 0. So we can also declare an array of integers, of strings, I'm sorry, and I'm going to call this one names, and I'm going to set it to John, Tom, George, Nancy. And this is another type of array. We can initialize an array, and I'm going to call this one random nums, and not assigning any values to the array. So I'm going to say that this array is going to have 5 numbers. So it's an array of length 5, and it's going to be of type integers. But it's going to be an empty array. So I'm going to make a comment here that says declaring arrays, and how can we display the value of the elements in an array? Well, one of the most common way to do that is using a for loop. I'm going to make another comment here that says traversing an array. And so I'm going to say for in I equals 0, I less than, and then we're going to use the length of the array we want to traverse. In this case, I'm going to use the numbers array. So I'm going to say numbers that length semicolon plus plus, because we need to increment the index of that array. And I'm going to say sysout, and I'm going to say index plus I equals, and I'm going to put a space here, and I'm going to say numbers I, and if I run this, notice that the array, actually I should have said numbers instead of index. Now let's run it again. Here we go. So the numbers array at index 0 holds the first value, which is 1, and at index 1 the second value, which is 2, and so on. And there is another way that we can display the content of an array, but this one is a little bit more simple. Let's say displaying content of an array, and this one is using system out, and I'm going to enter numbers, and this I'm going to pass to the print line. I'm going to pass the array numbers, and I'm going to run that. And notice, let me comment this section out. I'm going to run it again, and notice that I get a weird number printed out to the screen. And what I'm actually printing is the address in memory that holds this array. And so the correct way to print an array using a print line is by using the arrays class. So I'm going to invoke the toString method from the arrays class, and I'm going to pass the numbers array. And I'm going to run that again, and this time I get the array printed out to the screen. Another thing that we need to be watchful when initializing arrays, for example, is to take in consideration that arrays are reference based. And what I mean by this is that, for example, if I declare an array called A, and I assign the numbers 10, 20, and 30, for example, and then I create another array, and this one I'm going to call it B, and I'm going to initialize B to A. So supposedly B now has is another array containing 10, 20, and 30, but that's not the case, since arrays are reference based. If I, for example, happen to modify B, let's take a look at what's going on. So I'm going to say, I'm going to look through from I equals 0 to A dot length, and I'm going to say I plus plus, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, for example, B dot I, and I'm going to use the math at random function, and I'm going to multiply by 10 plus let's say 1, and I'm going to assign a random number to every single element in the array. And the compiler is oh, there we go, I need to cast. So basically what I'm doing, I'm generating a double, and my array is of type int, so I'm going to cast it into an integer, and now the error goes away. So over here we are going to print out the content of array A. Let's say array A, and we're going to do arrays dot toString A, and next we are going to print the content of array B, and we are going to do the same thing, print the content, this time the content of B, and just one more print out. In this case we are going to print the content of the address in memory of B and A, and hopefully they will both be the same. So let's run that, and notice how array A and array B now have the same data. And if we look at the space, the address in memory, it is exactly the same. So be careful when setting one array equals to another and then you modify one array. And by the way, the random numbers didn't actually work because the order of precedence here. So what I want to do, I want to first make sure I multiply math random times 10 and then add 1 to it, and instead of A equals, let's put an equal sign here, and let's run it again, and this time we successfully generated random numbers. So what is the correct way to copy an array? For example, this that we try to do here, we initialize A and we try to copy B equals to A. So the correct way to copy an array, so let's say correct way to copy arrays, let's say for int I equals 0, I less than 8 times length, I plus plus, and what I'm going to do here, instead of declaring an array B equals to A, what I want to actually do going to comment it out, and what I want to actually do is to create a new array. So I'm going to say int b equals new int, and I'm going to set it to 3, which is the length of the array A, or I could say a length, which is pretty much the same, since both arrays are going to contain the same number of elements. So I'm going to assign now to every single element in B the content of A, and this is the proper way to do it. So now let's go ahead and print both the content in memory, the address in memory of A, and I'm going to copy this here and B, and now this should have different address in memory. So let's go ahead. I'm going to comment this section out, and I'm going to run it again, and I have an error, 242, and in 242 of course we're trying to use B, and we commented out this line of code, so we need to do the same here. And let's run it again, and this time notice that both arrays contain different addresses in memory, and I guess I should have commented this out and print the content of B. And let's run it one more time. Okay, so now B contains 10, 20, and 30, and they both different arrays, so I can freely modify the content of either array without affecting the other. Another thing that I wanted to point out is that one of the caveats of array is the fact that it's impossible to add an element to the end of the array once the array has been declared and initialized. For example, this array contains 3 elements, and adding a 4th element is not possible. So in this section, let's take a look at how we can dynamically add a new element to the array. So I'm going to call this one dynamically growing an array, and it is actually dynamically, there we go, and I'm going to declare an array, and I'm going to set it to array 1, and I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so I'm going to say public static int. I'm going to return an array of type integer, and I'm going to call this one add to array, and I'm going to take 2 parameters. The first one is going to be of type array integer, and I'm going to call this one array, and the second one is going to be of type int, and it's going to be the number that I'm going to add at the end of the array. And so the first thing that I want to do, I want to create a temporary array, and I'm going to call it temp array, and I'm going to set this array, I'm going to initialize this array to the size of the old array, in this case array length plus 1. The new array needs to be the size of the old array plus 1. And so next I'm going to create a for loop, and I'm going to say int I equals 0, I less than array.length I plus plus. And I'm going to open and close curly braces, and I'm going to say temporary I equals array I, and this is how I'm going to copy the content of the array. I am going to change this to array. Here we go. And then right here at the end, I'm going to say temp array array length plus 1 equals num. Remember, we traverse the length of the original array and we assign the value to the temp array. So we have one extra value. Remember, we grew the temp array by 1, and we want to assign the new value to the end of the new array. And so finally we are going to return temp array. And somewhere down here I am going to say array1 equals add to array, and I'm going to say array1 comma, and I'm going to add the number 5, and finally I'm going to sys out and print the content of array1. And hopefully now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 inside array1. So let's go ahead and print that. Actually run it, and I have an error. Okay, so if we read the output of the console, we see that we have an array index out of bound exception, and this is what is known as a runtime error. And the runtime error, actually there is nothing syntactically wrong with the with the code, and if we follow along with every single link, we come across the second error here, which is on line 275. And if we go to line 275, we see that we are trying to assign number to array using the index number to array length plus 1. And remember that array at index base start at index 0. So the original array, which is array 1, only contains 4 elements, and so the temp array contains 5 elements, which is array length plus 1. And right here, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to assign the number to the 5th index of the array, which is non-existent. The new array has only 5 elements, which goes from 0 to 4, and so instead of plus 1, I'm just doing array length, and it should work this time. So let's go ahead and run it again, and here we go. Okay, so next let's see some of the more common operation performed with arrays. For example, let's calculate the total sum of an array, and I'm going to call this one, I'm going to return an int, and so I'm going to call this one total sum, and I'm going to take an array. I'm going to say int array, and I'm going to open and close curly braces, and I'm going to declare a variable called total sum. I'm going to set it to 0, and I'm going to say for int n, this is another way we can use a for loop, nums, actually array, and we can say total sum plus equal n, and finally let's return total sum, and somewhere up here let's say total sum of array, and actually it is array 1, and let's do sys out and call the array total sum of, and pass array 1 as the argument. And I'm going to comment this section out, And let's run the code. And I got 15. Another common operation in arrays is, for example, to find the largest or smaller number in the array. So I'm going to make a comment, says finding the largest in array. And this one I'm going to pretty much copy the method, and I'm going to modify it. I'm going to return the biggest number, so I'm going to call this one biggest, and I'm going to initialize a for loop. So I'm going to say int I equals 0, I less than array.length, I plus plus. And actually I'm going to call this one big num, and I'm going to initialize it up here, and I'm going to say if big num is smaller than n, I'm sorry, if it's big num smaller than array dot I, then we're going to say big num to array I, and we have a compiler error here, pretty much telling us to initialize the variable. So we're going to say big num initially to 0, and basically we're going to iterate through the array, and as soon as we encounter a number bigger than big number, we're going to assign the number to big number. We're going to continually compare and assigning until we find the largest number. Then at the end we're going to return that number. So let's do another comment here that says finding biggest in array 1, and let's run this one by do a sysout, and I forgot to change the name of the function. I'm going to call this one largest number, and I'm going to call it here. So I'm going to say largest num, and I'm going to pass array 1, and I'm going to comment this one out, and I'm going to run it. And so the largest number is 5. Another common operation with array is to another operation in arrays, for example, is to search the array looking for a specific value. So I'm going to name this one searching array and returning index of element, and I'm going to copy the previous skeleton of the function, or the method actually, and I'm going to call this one search employee. And what I want to do, I want to search whether a specific name or employee exists in my array. So I'm going to create an employee array, and I'm going to call this one employees, and I'm going to set it, actually I have an array of names somewhere. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to copy this one from here, so I don't have to type over and over, and I'm going to paste it here, but I'm going to remove the name. And what I want to do, I want to, for example, search whether a specific employee exists inside my array. So I'm going to say, for example, and I want to pass, instead of an int array, I want to pass an array of string, which is my employees, and I also want to pass the name of the employee I'm looking for. So in this case, I'm going to call it name. And okay, so I'm going to say if, actually for int I equals 0, I less than employees dot length I plus plus. And next, I'm going to say if employees I equals name, then we found the name inside our array, so I'm going to return I, which is the index of that element. Otherwise, at the end, if we reach the end, I'm going to return -1, and that is going to be my function. So somewhere up here, so I'm going to call the function, or the function, and I'm going to assign it to a variable called index. And I'm going to say search employee, and I'm going to pass the employees array followed by the name that I'm looking for. I'm looking for, the name is John, and then I'm going to say sysout, and I'm going to use the ternary operator. I'm going to say, for example, if index greater or equals 0, then we can say employee found at index followed by the index number, and else we can say employee not found. And let's go ahead and run that, and we have employee found actually at index 0, which is John is the first element, and instead of find, we should have said found, and I should have commented this out. And so instead of John, now let's try, for example, Nancy, and let's run that again. Now Nancy is found on index 3, so 0, 1, 2, 3. And that is it for this section, and see you in the next section.